The Forge became a viral Roblox game, getting millions of players within its first week of being released, and then began to slowly die out. In this game, players were having so much fun mining ores in the caves, and then forging them into new weapons and armor, which might be really good or really bad. But after a few months, the game began to get repetitive and players started to get bored, so they started leaving. But why did players begin to leave? This is the story of how the Forge became Roblox's fastest growing game with an even faster downfall. See, the Forge is a game about mining in caves for ores. You then have to use these ores to forge new armor and weapons, which would have a higher chance of being better depending on the rarity of the ores you decided to use. These upgrades will make you stronger, which would allow you to earn more money from completing harder quests. Most importantly, this game had some of the best animation and game story in all of Roblox. In general, the game just felt for grown-ups and not for brain-rotted children with half a brain playing games where you have to steal other people's big brown stick while holding a bat. So, if this game is so good after all, what happened to all of the players? Here are 5 reasons why the Forge slowly began to die out. First, players began to leave since the game began to slow down, with slow and inconsistent updates. The Forge community hated this. Everything the developers promised to add to the game kept on getting delayed and delayed. Players just kept waiting until it took too long, and they got frustrated and left, never returning back. Even when the updates were added, these updates would make the game even more of a grind for players, and when these players would grind for hours for a new pickaxe, in the next update a new pickaxe would be added, which would take many days of grinding to get. Players just got bored of doing the same things again and again. The second problem was the balance between different classes. In the Forge, there are many different types of classes with their own rarity and special abilities. These classes were also not really balanced. Some of the classes were overpowered, and others were completely useless. During the updates, many of the classes received buffs, making them better than the older classes, which got outdated. The tutorials of the game were also pretty weak, so it was hard for new players to understand and like the game enough to continue playing it. New players also struggled to keep up because the updates were mostly focused on adding new features, which required a lot of grinding. New players just got lost in all of the things happening around them and couldn't understand the game anymore. This was one of the main reasons for the game's downfall, because new players who wanted to try out the game for the first time were having trouble finding out what was happening around them and what the main goal of the game was. This was bad for the game since most of the returning players had already left. They had to make sure new players played the game to keep it in the top 10 games on Roblox. However, the devs couldn't keep up with releasing new updates and got tired, which brings us to the fourth reason. The fourth problem was that the developers couldn't keep up with making updates for the complex system of the game. The developers also wanted to make big updates instead of smaller, more frequent updates, which would have made the game less likely to die out. New ideas were planned ahead and added to the game while the old features still needed polishing and had a few bugs. The Forge community also expected all of the new updates to be bigger than the last, which created lots of pressure for the developers, making them stressed out and worried. Roblox games, or any type of video game in general, require strong momentum to keep going viral and getting millions of players. Since this was not able to happen, the game's momentum completely died out and players began to quit. The sudden decrease in the player count must have made the devs really demotivated since the game is well made, and the expectations players had made them overwhelmed. And coding new updates became harder and harder until it was too much to do, and the developers did not have enough time to meet their players' expectations.